Hello, everyone. So today I'm very excited to introduce Emily Tang. How are you doing, Emily?
Pretty good. Thanks, Michelle. It's so nice to talk to you finally after such a long time of
I know
trying to link.
we had a lot of back and forth, lots of delays for different reasons, with moving and different things going on in our lives. But I'm so happy to have Emily today. Emily is a crypto expert for the quantum financial system. And as you know, Emily, I've got a spiritual community that follow me on the whole. And I've been trying to channel to people what this new quantum financial system might look like. And I thought it would be really good if you could hear some of the things that I've been channeling and maybe put some input in at quite a basic level today, just to get everybody acquainted with your work and just get us started, really, with a
Sure,
view.
absolutely.
Yes, with a view to maybe doing some more videos if we later on, and where we could bring in some more concepts. How does that sound?
That sounds like it would be my pleasure, my honor to work with you, Michelle.
Oh, thank you so much. So, really, what I was going to do today, Emily, was talk to you and the audience about. I did a video recently on my locals channel called the Quantum Worldwide Vault. And when that channeling came in, it just kind of explained a little bit about how the assets will be devolved to the people around the world. And I thought that would be quite a good thing for us to sort of talk about today. So I thought, first of all, if I gave an overview of what they've taught me the quantum financial system is, and then I can hand it over to you to see what your thoughts are. So, how does that sound?
That sounds great. I can't wait.
Okay. So, first of all, I asked them to just basically give us an overview about what the quantum financial system is. Um, and they did say to me that it's a very complex system, very complex centralized system, which is being designed to give the end user a decentralized, encrypted process of storing, obtaining, and transmitting money. So I don't know if that's how you see the quantum financial system, but would you say that's an accurate
That is
vision?
completely 100% correct.
Well, that's
And what I
good.
can add to that is decentralization. I think a lot of people inherently understand the term, but when they start to look at the definition, that's what confuses them. And so, what I want to help clarify is that decentralization is actually how you have more privacy, more security than before, because no one person or one organization is in control of it. We, the people, are in control of it. And so when you put together the collective consciousness and have all of us, all the patriots around the world, all the people who are learning about consciousness, waking up to that, that's how you then monitor and make sure that people and everything is moving with integrity.
So when you say decentralized from your understanding, what I've been taught is that we will be having equipment like laptops, phones, various pieces of technology, where when we want to do our banking or store personal information, it literally will be on our little piece of technology and it won't be shared into the central system. And that's how we keep the integrity of the data. Is that your understanding of decentralized as well?
There are a couple different components to it, so I want to try to keep it pretty basic. Do you mind if I screen share a picture really quickly? That might help to give
Yeah,
some
that would
context.
be amazing. Yeah.
Give me a second, please. And what I'll do is I'll probably eventually share two different pictures, but we'll start with this one and kind of see how it goes. So this is a concept of blockchain at its very, very simplest. And earlier you mentioned emails, and I think email would be a really great analogy for this, with the exception of the fact that emails can be hacked, right? Because the servers can be hacked, the emails can be read. And so what we're looking right now is basically this reverse C shape going from left to right, down, then right to left. So in a traditional system, if you send an email, let's say I send an email to you, then I type your address and I type the content in, I hit the send, and it goes through, as an example, the Google server or the Yahoo server. Now, in this case, what's happening is you replace the server of, let's say, Google or Yahoo, and you have what's called a node. And you don't have to remember these terms. They're just, for people who want to do some more research. And so these nodes are created all over the world, and anybody who wants to be one can be one. That way it's decentralized, and there can be thousands or even millions of these all over the world. And so as you're sending this information out into, the vault or through the pathway that the email is taking shape, it goes to this decentralized, call it a database, if you will. And all these validators have to say, the consensus has to say, yes, this is legitimate. There's no, laundering or anything like that. And so as it goes through their approval process, it's going to get outputted through what we call a blockchain, because it's a chain of all these blocks. And so even though you might be sending an individual email, the information goes into the server, comes out of the server as a string of emails. And so your email could be one of like a million that goes out at that specific instance. And because it's in that train of emails in this middle right here, it gets stored onto the online ledger. And so that way, that's how you have complete transparency. It's immutable, meaning, once you send it, you can't edit it, you can't delete it. People can see that this transaction went through. They might not be able to see all the details of it, which is what you're referring to earlier, but they can at least see that, yes, so-and-so sent this at this time, and then so-and-so received it successfully, or if they did not receive it successfully. And so hopefully that makes sense. So you're still doing the same action as the end user, but the system has changed in the background only.
That's interesting, because the next thing below what I had just told you was about the blockchain, and it's just a very small definition. But they were saying that in order for the quantum financial system to be centralized, that the blockchain will be necessary where there is a third party or multiple party involvement in between the user, who is decentralized, as you've just explained, and the centralized software of the quantum financial system. They said that the parties who become involved along the transaction timeline will need to have their information stored and analyzed on the blockchain before the transaction is authorized, which is really what I think you've just been saying.
Mm-hmm.
It also said that the blockchain is a set of safety gates that each transaction will need to pass through before it reaches the final destination.
Yes.
So that kind of ties in with what you've just been saying there. Yeah, so you've got the graphic.
The information that you're receiving is beautiful because, knowing that you didn't know what this is all about and you're saying it after I just explained it, we're coming to it from, different perspectives, but it's still the same information. Okay. And that's how it's so powerful.
So my next question then to them was, so, where are these funds going to be held if the banks are becoming obsolete during this sort of financial reorganization? And will the banks become obsolete? And what they said to me about the banks was, yes, the banks, as they are currently understood, will become obsolete, and monies will not be stored in bank vaults or bonds, as is currently the case. They said that instead, we're going to have a digital encrypted ID of people's eCash, which will be stored on a digital wallet of the end user's choosing. They said that the centralized system will know all the authorized digital wallets and all the authorized digital currencies, tokens, and funds. And through the blockchains, each transaction will be identified by its unique receiver and send code. And they're saying that, again, it would be encrypted and, sorry, just turning the page, encrypted and registered. And they said that if the digital funds are not from a recognized funding source, which is what you were referring to a minute ago, then they can be stopped. And again, they were saying that the potential for fraud, money laundering, trafficking with the current development of the blockchain at Web3 will be minimal. They won't be able to do that. But they said that once we start getting into something called Web 5, Web 7, which if anyone has been following me, they'll know I did a video about that before Christmas, which is where the blockchain is at military grade. So they're saying that the level of Web 5, Web 7, which is currently being developed, it will be absolutely impossible for anything like laundering, trafficking to go through these stops, checks and balances of the blockchain. And they said that the new systems are set up and programmed to only allow through those transactions which serve humanity's progress towards a fairer distribution of wealth. So again, they were backing up what you've just explained on your blockchain sheet, where you were explaining that through the consciousness of the users, the blockchain will be able to store information and keep it encrypted, and it will be the users that keep the system safe and fair. Is that a good way to explain it, Emily?
That's a beautiful way to explain it, actually. And you hit so many points in that when you're reading the channeling process that really, really resonate with me and the information that I've been finding on my side as well. And for the sake of your audience, if you've never heard of me or the work that we do with QSI, what we've been doing so far is, I think all of us between, people who follow you, people who follow me, we all understand the Q plan. And we all understand the concepts of white hats and black hats, and that this is a big military operation. And I think what gets really confusing is in the past, for many, many years, all of us have just been decoding things in the background. And decoding is great, but it really means that you're creating theories based on what people think they know, and you can either be right or wrong at the end of it. And so what I've been doing for the last year plus is we're saying, let's stop with the theorizing. There are still a couple theories I'll post every now and then, but what I really focus on now is what information can we find through open source methods that anybody can validate. That way, this is all confirmed with documents, resources, materials, and you can fact check every single thing that I say. And so when I'm nodding my head and I'm agreeing with you, it's because I have documents to prove that what you said is actually absolutely accurate.
Wow.
And so, yeah, a couple things I want to mention, and I won't get into those visuals because I think that might be a little too advanced for this call, but I can in the future if you want. But as an example, when you talk about this vault system and this digitization of your assets, immediately in my mind, I'm thinking about when you play poker, right? I think everybody understands the concept of a casino. You go, you cash your money in, you get these chips that represent the assets that you have. And whether you're in a physical casino or let's say playing online poker, it's that chip that then moves around to all the different players. So you can either gain more chips or you send more chips out. And that's kind of how this works in terms of digitalized assets, digitalized currencies, etc. And so what I also wanted to add to that as well is when you talked about how the banks will become obsolete, that is an absolute fact. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because there is a public narrative going out there right now that actually says the opposite. And you may have heard of this before, right? A lot of people have been talking about CBDCs, which stands for the Central Bank of Digital Currency. And the reason why it gets very confusing is because, as I'm studying the psychology behind this Q plan, I think most of us understand that, we'll take the vaccine as an example. The public narrative is that vaccines are so good for you, everybody take it, it'll save you, your family, the planet. But those of us who do the research have to dig into what is the truth behind the vaccine, what's in the patent, how is it being used, how has it been tested or not, etc. And so you're dispelling the public narrative. But on this side of blockchain and crypto and the white hat side of it, it's the opposite. So the public narrative is that CBDCs are bad for you and you don't want to have them. And they're discouraging people from wanting to actually bring it into fruition. Now, what I can say is when this concept first started, it was a World Economic Forum agenda. It was going to be used for bad. But what I can also say is by time people have actually started to program this, right? Because it's digital, so it has to be programmed. By the time they started programming this, the white hats had actually already taken over. And so everything that's been programmed is being done for good.
This is very interesting because when they channeled to me, I haven't got that information in front of me at the moment, but you can hear about that on me talking with Nick Veniamin. But they've told me that CBDC stands for Centralized Banking Digital Currency. Now, if you think of centralized banking as Starlink, that's the centralized bit. And then the digital currency is us down here. So again, it's the two layers involved, the centralized Starlink and the end user. Nowhere in that definition is there a bank. So again, it's what's happening is they're using similar words to mean two different concepts. So I totally I'm on board with exactly what you're saying, even though I don't understand it the same way as obviously you do.
You know, and it's so amazing that you said that, because I've actually tried to explain this to people who believe that they are experts and they cannot grasp that at all. And you just said exactly what's happening. So I want to share, I wasn't planning to share this, but I will, since I feel like, you and your audience are ready to see it. Now, this information, if people want to hear more of it, I have done several videos on this topic. And so you can get, a plethora of details on that in the future. But when you mention that central banks are actually not the central bank, nor are they the banks, it's absolutely correct. They're literally just tokens on the blockchain. There's no physical structure. And when people start to, really dive into the research of how does it work on the blockchain and what is what's called a smart contract, which I'll get into in a little bit, how does that work? This is actually the system that destroys the banks and destroys the central banks.
Yes. And so exactly. I'm totally on board with you about this. Yeah.
And so it kind of makes me giggle, because when we're over here in the Stellar blockchain ecosystem, which is going to be, in the QFS, there are multiple blockchains, and we're talking about the good ones, not the bad ones that people have probably heard of before, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, etc. Those are what's known as the Khazarian blockchains, and they will be going away, possibly in the next couple of weeks, but definitely in the next couple of months. And what I've been kind of helping, I don't know if this will be helpful for your audience, but what I've been trying to explain to people is we're moving from the CFS, the Cabal financial system, into the QFS, the quantum financial system. So when you think about it in that concept, you have to now move the money, right? There's the trillions of dollars in the old system, and how they're moving it is they're going to tokenize everything and then bring it into the blockchain. So it is safe and secure. Just like what you said with the military grade blockchain, I actually work with several of them that are building this out right now. And as it inputs into the system, these are all these tokens. And so what I'm showing you on this picture right now is in the Stellar universe, there's a domain that's called cbdc-tokens.org, as you can see right here.
Oh, yeah.
And all of these tokens belong on the CBDC domain. But if you look at them, these aren't your central banks, right? There's nowhere in here it says Central Bank of England, Central Bank of, whatever country it is. This is IBM WorldWire. IBM, as you may know, is actually the #1 quantum computing company in the whole world. And WorldWire is going to be the governance of all the different quantum computers. It's going to be the main centralized one to help to, govern and make sure that all the other ones are functioning properly, behaving properly. And it's going to be backed by Starlink and the military alliance.
Just to stop you there for one moment. So this is the first time I'm hearing this, but for the past 2 years, I've been teaching my audience that what we've been waiting on in the past is for all the countries to sign in to Starlink using the precepts of the quantum financial system, meaning that they couldn't sign into this system unless they agreed to certain behaviors. And two of them were that they maintained peace with their citizens and with other countries. And so when I was being asked constantly, what is holding everything up? In answer to that, I was saying that one of the reasons was because we were waiting on a large percentage of the world to all get lined up with the Starlink and what these conditions were. And it sounds like the governance for that is this IBM WorldWire, sorry. And this is the first time I'm hearing this. So now that isn't making sense to me as to what they've been telling me for 2 years. So are we saying, Emily, that most countries now at some level are signed into this IBM WorldWire in order to participate in this banking system?
Actually, it's not most, it's all. And so what ended up happening, there's somebody that I work with very closely, and he goes by the name on Telegram as Noah Amars. Noah's real name is actually Ralph Amars, and if people do their research into, who this persona is, he's actually well, publicly he just stepped down, but let's say prior to about a week ago or so, his public persona is the CEO of UBS Bank in Switzerland.
Which bank was that?
This Ralph Amars has a secondary role, which is
the
UBS. UBS in Switzerland.
Oh, the UBS. Sorry, your connection just went a little bit funny there. So the UBS Bank in Switzerland, you have contact with Noah.
Yes, so he is the CEO of UBS, but he actually serves a double role. He is a major white hat, and we've been working with him very closely for about a year now in our channel. And he leads something called SPIA, which it just stands for Stellar Project Integrity Audit. And what they do is they're the governance group that goes around, and they were the ones that signed every bank, every single central bank, every treasury department of every single country in the entire world in order to activate the QFS. So they were able to accomplish that at the end of October last.
Emily, if you haven't heard me speaking with Nick Veniamin for the past 2 years, if you go back to the video called Quantum Generation, this was where I first started getting these visuals of the Starlink linking to these decentralized systems and the countries all having to sign in. And I was explaining to people, this is how we're going to get the world peace. Because all of the countries have a piece in Starlink. They all have a piece of the cake, if you like, in terms of setting it up on a technological level. And the way that it will police itself is that if any of those countries don't adhere to the governance, to the principles, to the precepts of what the system stands for, then all the other countries could lock their piece of cake out. And that's how you keep everybody working together. Because if you're the UK, for example, and at that point we had Boris Johnson, and I was saying, if, say, for example, Boris Johnson didn't abide by the precepts of the banking governance, then essentially you could lock out the UK. Are you still there, Emily? So it's interesting, Emily, that you talked about the governance that people would have to be under that bank. What was it called again? The IBM WorldWire? Was that?
Well, IBM WorldWire is going to be not a bank, but the quantum computer. It's the main governance quantum computer.
Sorry, that's what I meant. So if we've got the IBM WorldWire that has this set of precepts or governance that you have to abide by in order to be part of it, then this goes back to what I've been talking about and channeling for nearly 2 years now, when I've been on with Nick Veniamin. And so about 2 years ago, we started talking about something called the quantum generation, where I was being shown that you've got the Starlink up here and that every country has got a piece of it. So it's like a piece of a cake. And they were showing me that if any of those countries didn't abide by the rules, the governance, they could be locked out. And I was like so excited by this, Emily, because that's how we get kind of a world peace. Because if all the countries have to be signed into it to be part of it, if one of them then starts creating hostility towards other countries or its citizens, if we go back to the precepts of, say, Nosora Dosora, we have to have peace in order to be in it. Then let's imagine, say, one country decides it's not going to abide by the rules of governance. It's only got a piece of the cake. So that means that the rest of the system can lock it out. So we never actually need to go to war again if this system runs in the way that it's being explained to me, because no country is going to want to be locked out of that system.
Yes.
And if you
and I can actually prove what you said is true.
Yes.
So this is the World Bank document from 2018 is when they started writing that. And of course, remember that Trump came in office 2017, and then he put together this executive order to start the Quantum National Initiative.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go over every bullet point here, but dear, here on the bottom, hopefully you can see this. It talks about the conclusion of Model 3. And it says the public blockchain systems where an organization takes on the responsibility and the liability for running the system. Now they're referring to IBM Hyperledger and IBM WorldWire. And it says this could be through open source systems such as Hyperledger, which has the ability to for organizations to alter the network according to their needs, grant permissions to those who need it, and keep out those who don't. So literally the World Bank that was being controlled by the white hats at the time are confirming everything that you've said just now.
Okay, so Emily, what I would like to do, I'm getting quite excited now, because what I want to share with you, Emily, to see what your feedback is everybody wants to really understand how this redistribution of wealth is gonna work. So I wanted to ask then that, you know, what is this quantum financial system in terms of how they're going to redistribute?
You have type 2 diabetes and your numbers are still high despite taking pills or insulin, you're missing the secret to normalizing your blood sugar with a natural ingredient.
I say this because today I looked at my cinnamon recipe, the same one that lowered my blood sugar from 240 to 95 in less than a month. People who once lived chained to finger pricks are now eating what they love without fearing the next test. I had to stop everything just to process it. I never thought I'd have an A1C of 6.2 after years of being above 10. The billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry tried to silence me, but I'm going to share the recipe that mimics the effects of insulin and metformin, but made at home and without side effects. If this video reached you, congratulations, you got lucky. Tap anywhere that says learn more to access the full recipe and make it at home. When I started, my doctor said it would be impossible. But the truth is, I was tired of all the lies on the internet. Miracle teas, expensive supplements, crazy diets. So I decided to try this viral cinnamon recipe. The only reason I stopped was because my blood sugar finally stabilized and my life went back to normal. I felt lighter, with energy and confident, like something had finally clicked in my body. Within weeks, my monitor started showing numbers I hadn't seen in decades. To give you an idea, last month I woke up with a 230 reading. Today, I wake up every day below 100. 1 cup a day is all many people are having before bed. And now friends and family are asking, what are you doing? No restrictive diets, no expensive medications, and no fear of eating out.
The wealth, because I think everybody's wanting to understand that. So if you don't mind, if you're okay with this, Emily, I'm going to just read out the little bit of channeling they gave me about something.
Sure. I would love to hear, because I've got different ways to answer that with more evidence. So I really want to hear what you have to say first.
Okay, so if I show you the quantum, what they've said to me about what the quantum vault is, and then I just can tell that you're going to have something that can back it up. So I said to them, they said to me, the concept of international trading will change with the quantum financial system, as it will become more desirable financially to trade within your own respective geographical or natural resource region. And I didn't really understand what they were saying by that, but so I went on with a few more questions. I said, I don't really, sorry, I just got to find the answer to that. Then I said, so what does that actually mean in real terms? Are you saying, for example, that oil would be encouraged to be sold only within its country or location of origin? And they're saying in some cases, yes, as oil, they're saying, would not be necessary going into the future, as different types of energy will then be brought forward to replace oil. They're saying as well that it will be the same for things like precious commodities like silver, gold, and diamonds, and that in the future, they would be most effective in their local region of natural occurrence. So now I didn't really understand, because they were saying they wanted to keep, if you're a country that happens to have oil or gold or silver or diamonds, you can keep them. So now I was really confused, Emily, because I was thinking, well, what about those countries that don't have that don't have those assets? Because they're explaining to us here that under the new system, you will be able to keep your gold, oil, silver, whatever asset you have. So I said to them, so now I'm really confused. I'm not really sure that I understand this concept, because I said to them, doesn't gold and silver, for example, need to be held in each financial location of the world to create an even supply? So my understanding was that gold and silver has been getting shipped around everywhere, so that you've got a little bit in your location, I've got a little bit in mine, and we've all got a little equal bit. And they said, no, that's not the case. They said, because the gold and silver assets will belong to the centralized system of the QFS as a whole, irrespective of where they're located. And I said, so do you mean like a big holding pot? The QFS will be like a big holding pot. And they said, kind of, yes. They said the QFS will be like a virtual vault. And so all the world's assets, whether they're, and precious materials, they'll still be in their place of origination. So they'll still be in their home countries and continents. And it will be unimportant where that is. They said, so then I said, so why are the gold and silver and the precious assets to be stored on this virtual vault? Why? And they said that if all the assets are virtually stored on the QFS, then they can be, after that, fairly divided out. So the first thing before I carry on was that in the past, I thought that all these assets of the world were all getting divided up and shipped off to different locations, so that all the world had equal amounts physically in their countries. And I thought that was what was holding us up, Emily, because I thought, well, imagine if you're Saudi Arabia, you've got all this asset, you're not going to be very happy about giving it all out to everybody all around the world. So now let's go a bit deeper into how they're explaining this is going to work. So I said to them, so the actual gold, silver, and oil, or the precious asset that you have, it will not be stored in the country's vault physically. And they said, yes, it will be. They're saying the assets for the countries will still be physically held within their geographical region, but the value of the assets for trade and distribution will be added to the virtual vault. So if I've got £100 worth of gold and you've got £100 worth of silver, Emily, you and I don't have to give any of our gold and silver to any of our friends. We just say to the virtual vault, I've got £100 of gold, Emily's got £100 of silver. That gets added to the total fund, the virtual fund. So this was the first thing that was an eye-opener for me, that no physical asset is leaving any country or being moved around. So then I said to them, so this virtual fund is part of the quantum financial system. And I said, so are you then saying it's going to be distributed out fairly to the rest of humanity? And that's what they were saying is going to happen. So they were saying, and they drew me a little diagram, which is this one down here, which basically, I'll just do it with my hands. They're saying that you've got the quantum financial system up here, which is your worldwide central virtual vault. And this represents the total virtual value of all the assets in the world. So it's got my £100 worth of gold, Emily's £100 worth of silver, and everybody else's, and it's reflected up there as a virtual vault. And so it doesn't matter how much you've got in Saudi or Africa or America, it doesn't matter the amounts, you add them all together and put the total fund into the virtual vault. So then I said to them, so the quantum financial system vault will have a total central value based on the valuation of all the assets combined from all the regions worldwide. And they said yes. And I said, so are countries and regions signed into this agreement now? And they said, on the whole, yes. Now I channeled this back in, I think it was November. I asked them to what extent. They said 85% of the world was signed in. I don't know how that corresponds to what we were saying before, but we can check in a minute. And then I said to them, so, okay, we've got this virtual fund. How do we then distribute that out? How does that then come back to you and me or to each country? And they said it will be distributed in the format, which will either be tokens, cryptocurrency, e-cash, or digital cash. So then I said, who is going to decide what is fair when they're distributing it back out? Because that's quite important, Emily, isn't it? How they're going to decide. They said the money will mainly be distributed using digital and tokens. And they're saying that the distribution will be fair in the sense that the exchange rates will no longer be used in different countries. They're saying that each coin will be worth one wherever you are. So I don't know if we really understand that yet. So they're saying, for example, one We the People coin in the USA will be worth one coin in another country. So if they're going to distribute it out equally, one will be equal to one wherever you are. They said the QFS vault will divide the total fund of assets fairly to every human, regardless of where they live. And they're saying that at the decentralized level, the people will then use their digital cash to trade or to buy locally. I don't want to go any further at the moment, Emily, so I don't want to overwhelm you, but how does that sound so far with your understanding of how the QFS works?
I'm trying to take as many notes as quickly as possible because there are so many things I can validate for you based on what you said just now. Okay, so I'm trying to think, where do we start? Okay, if I had to use another kind of gaming analogy, think about when you first start Monopoly, the game, right? Everybody starts, and it doesn't matter how wealthy you are in your real life, but the banker comes out and they say, okay, I don't remember the number, $200 for you, $200 for you, whatever that is. That'll be very similar to this because it's the redistribution of wealth, but it's that level playing field that all the heads of state has been talking about, because you have to make sure that everybody has that level playing field before all the market forces start to take in. So that's why they're getting rid of the debt, they're changing all the constitutions, etc. Right? So it's like you don't start with any other kind of preconception. You start where everybody else is starting, and there's no exception to the rule in this case. So that's the first thing I want to say. The other thing is, when you're talking about the physical assets, so for instance, like you mentioned, gold and silver, and they're being locked up in vaults. Yes. So, for people who have been paying attention to the news, they would have seen that all these different central banks and all these different countries around the world are basically hoarding natural resources right now. And it's being done because, again, guys, the central banks are not the cabal anymore. They're being run by the white hats. And so they have to store it in their vault because of something called Basel III compliance. And not to get into too much technical detail, but Basel III compliance just means that you have to store an X percentage of your funds in there. Otherwise, your bank will topple and default. So they've basically been hoarding onto that. But as you and I both discussed at the beginning of this call, eventually, no matter how much gold or silver they have, because of how the white hats are going to implode the entire financial system, all the banks will have to default anyways. And so when that happens, basically the white hats just take over all of that, the physical assets, and they get stored in their treasuries. So then you mentioned about how they're going to be distributing it, whether it's a digital token or a digital currency. You mentioned some other terms there too. Well, over here in blockchain, they all mean the same thing.
Okay.
So,
okay.
So I'll get into a little bit more detail on that in a second. But and you also mentioned that it's going to be regionalized. So the way that I'm kind of seeing this right now is, the BRICS nations, which is really just a handful of countries in the world publicly, have actually started to adopt more and more countries behind the scenes. And Charlie Ward has been doing a really great job kind of updating us with the numbers. I don't remember exactly what that number is, but I want to say it's upwards of 100, maybe even 170 countries that actually joined that BRICS alliance without formally making it known, being a formal announcement just yet. Okay. But if people are watching the news come out, you'll see that articles, and I don't have them saved, so I apologize for that. But you'll see that articles will say, so-and-so country has applied, and it's like a list of 40 countries that have applied to join BRICS. Wow. There's another one called the SCO. It stands for the Shanghai Cooperative Organization. And they also have another alliance of countries, maybe something close to 30, 40, 50 countries by now. And so when you overlap the two together, you're talking about, probably 80, 90% of the whole world is actually in the same financial, the same geopolitical alliance, but it's all being done behind the scenes through these military NDAs, which you've also mentioned in the past as well. And then I want to kind of circle back to some other topics that you said. When it comes to these digital wallets, yes. So over here in Stellar, we have a digital wallet, and there are so many different platforms you can choose. So for instance, like if you want to have a phone, it doesn't matter if you have an Apple or an Android or whatever else is out there, Huobi and Google phones. You can choose which one you like based on the look and feel. But the operating system of how it works is going to be the same for you and me, even if we have a different type of wallet, because all of that is just a program. So it's like a skin, right? It's like another version would be a bill of money. You and I would have the same bill of money, but you can choose to have this brand name of wallet, and I can choose to have that brand name of wallet. So it makes it very simple to personalize while still being connected to that same system. There's also something called KYC AML, and it stands for Know Your Customer, Anti-Money Laundering, which you've also mentioned earlier. And this gets very interesting because there's a company called R3, and they have a system called Conclave. And what they do is they are basically connecting all of the world's monies. So whether it's a physical, let's say like your bank account and your checking and savings account at your local bank, or if it's a blockchain digital wallet, no matter which blockchain you're on, they're the company that's out there putting this KYC AML together. And how it works is they have this massive database, and it's connected to all the world's, all the governments' database of people. And so that will be also governed by Starlink at the same time. And so let's say, if Joe Schmo down the street is a criminal and he's been flagged as a criminal, if he tries to move his money because he's a launderer and he's trying to hide his assets over here by, moving it somehow, he won't be able to anymore because the systems are on flag to alert his account. And there's something called a clawback, which I think many people, if they've been in the financial industry before, they would have heard this term, right? So a clawback is when, as an example, a government or a company that you work for needs to take back that fund because it was, illegally or wrongfully doled out. So in this case, when it comes to the blockchain, there are certain currencies out there, we call them stablecoin. And a stablecoin is just a digital representation of your physical money. So say, I've got a US dollar and you have a British pound, or, whatever it is. Your British pound will have a digital version of a British pound. My US dollar will have a digital version of a US dollar. And so if I'm a launderer, because of this KYC AML, there are all these additional protocols being developed in the system by the military. And they can say, these 99.9% of the population, there's nothing to flag them on. They can proceed to trade as per normal. And, we're just going to monitor in the background. We're just going to do things to make sure people are safe. But this 0.1% are criminals, and we've caught them. We have evidence they're doing something illegal. And it could be through, Trump's triple executive order, 13818, 13848, 13959. It could be through the USMCA Act, Section 27.5. These are just examples of what's going to happen for the future. So once those accounts are flagged, they cut them off. And that's part of what, we were looking at with that World Bank document earlier. Yes. So once those are frozen, most criminals can't perform without funding access. And because of how the system is integrated with, as an example, Space Force, the NSA, they can then pinpoint their location and then go arrest them at the same time too. So it becomes very, very transparent because you cannot hide anything. And that's, a really amazing part of the system. There are a couple.
Go ahead. What you've been saying about being able to pinpoint people, I've been saying that for some time through my channeling, that people just cannot hide in this system. But just to clarify, they're also saying it's not a surveillance system, as people keep saying. It's actually a system for freedom. Because
yes,
when you're actually on this system, it means you're going to be able to travel more freely and do everything with, because you're not going to need passports and visas and things like that, because you're going to have a digital ID of your own, and the system will know where everybody is, but not because it wants to control you and keep you locked down, because it just wants you to be able to to move around more easily. And the only people that need to be concerned are those ones that are doing the money laundering or the trafficking or, the bad deeds.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it gets explained to me.
Yes, and that's absolutely right. And I'm so glad that you said that, because again, guys, part of the public narrative is that CBDCs want to control you, that you have no privacy, no security. It's very restrictive. And that's just simply not the case. When you study the technology, you'll find it's the exact opposite. So I want to do a couple of different screen shares for you. That way we can get, some visuals.
The way that I get people to remember what CBDC stands for is the first two words, centralized banking. Don't forget, yes. Centralized banking means Starlink. And the digital currency, which is the DC bit, the centralized banking digital currency, the digital currency is the bit you're talking about, Emily, with our phones and, whichever one we decide to use. There's nothing in the middle. There's no bank in the middle. So there's nothing in the middle to control us. It comes straight down from the top, from that centralized Starlink. And then it comes into our encrypted system, our phone, our laptop, our wallet. And then what we do inside of there is completely private.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. So I'm going to show a couple different things, and I'll kind of bounce back and forth because I have, while you're talking, I'm just getting so much inspiration for what I want to share with you. So bear with me a little bit as I kind of bounce between different things. Let's see. Right now, what I'm showing you is a public version of a ledger. And this is on the Stellar Ledger right now. And there are so many different websites that you can use for that. I think to date, there are maybe 6 public versions of a ledger. But so what I want to show you right now is there's an asset called, where is the name? I had to move boxes.
Emily, when you say ledger, do you mean
yes.
That's the virtual vault?
This is the public version of the virtual vault. And okay. So there's actually a more, there's one that has higher security on it, but I don't have access to it. So right now they're beta testing everything. And because of the beta test, they have to limit it to what you're allowed to see.
Okay.
What I'm doing right now is I'm pulling the Swiss custody one. And as you can see, anybody in the world can actually go and look at, what's being sent around the world. So this wallet, which is represented by numbers and letters, is sending a partial asset to this wallet over here. And so you can track people, but you don't know who it belongs to. And that's why you have both transparency, but also privacy at the same time. And so what I want to do is, okay, we'll go into this one because this one is quite a juicy one that people have been talking about. And I want to remind everybody because they'll look at the recording and go, oh my gosh, it says it's being reported for illicit or fraudulent activity. The reason why they're doing that is because the black hats who actually control this particular website, first of all, he has been locked up. He's being interrogated by let's call them the Friends of the Army at this moment. He's been trying to hide information on this ledger, but he can't because we've been finding workarounds for it. But I'm digressing right now. So this is the SGB token. It stands for sovereign gold bonds. And I think many people around the world have heard of sovereign gold bonds. India is actually very, very big on the production, the collection, and the eventual distribution of the sovereign gold bond. And that's being done through the RBI, the Royal Bank of India, or regional or royal? One of the words, Bank of India. So as you see here, this is the total supply. And that's, kind of like the big total vault you mentioned earlier. And you can see all the details on it, how many people have access to it. Currently, 28,812, unique users have access to it. And if I scroll down to here, I'm going to go hit the asset holder. And you can see, of all these users, how much of that token do they have? Nowhere in here can you see the names, the contact information of anybody. You're just represented by this string of numbers and letters that I mentioned before. And then you can see the distribution of it. And so as anything is flowing in and out on the blockchain, we can all track it. So that gets really important because you as an individual, anywhere in the world, as long as you have access to the internet, you can now say, okay, if I'm trying to discover if this person, this company, or this government is doing something illegal, I can do it on this blockchain because the ledger is the proof of, all the transactions to and from. And, as people get to learn more about how to do the auditing process of this, you can actually see what is real illegal behavior versus what is legitimate, even if you don't know who it belongs to just yet. So it gets very exciting to kind of, go through that movement. And that could be a call for later down the road. Now, I want to switch gears.
Well, actually, Emily, just talking about how they track it, the video that I put out on Locals called the Quantum Virtual Vault. We're not going to do the detail of the blockchain today, but I did go into detail with my channeling about how they are able to track transactions whilst also keeping them private. So yes, if you ever have a little bit of time and you can hear the rest of that video and what I said about the blockchain, I think, and how they do that, I think it'd be good if we did another call on another day and maybe pulled that apart a little bit as well, so that so that people will actually understand how you can have it visible and yet encrypted at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the most important things that people need to keep in the back of their mind is that it is transparent and protective in terms of security and identity at the same time, which sounds like an oxymoron, but they're somehow able to make it happen over here. So here I'm just showing some updates from February, and this is the CFTC. It's the Commodities Future Trading Commission in America. So even though this applies to America, it actually really applies to the entire world because, Michelle, as you've probably channeled before, maybe mentioned on previous videos, all of these different governments and their governance layers are starting to collaborate around the world. So yes, what one country is really actually what the Global Alliance is doing. And so these are just 3 big updates from February alone. You can see that, the SEC is going after all crypto exchanges soon. And the reason is because they are guilty of money laundering. They're guilty of election rigging. I think everybody under the sun has heard of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. He's just one example, but there are going to be so many examples of that. And so what I've been told is we're going to go eventually through a season of class action lawsuits, and it could take up to 18 months to get through that many of those companies. And then the second one over here, so GMAC is the Global Market Advisory Council. It's a subcommittee within the CFTC. And what got really interesting is in the middle, so February 3rd, Stellar, the blockchain that I study pretty exclusively, they actually got inducted into GMAC Council of CFTC. In their very first time presenting any information to the CFTC, they talked about something called Stellar Aid Assist. And I'll get into that detail in a different slide in a second, but this is actually how they're going to push out the universal basic income that's a part of GESARA to the entire world. And the last thing I mentioned really quickly.
Sorry to interrupt you, just if I don't say it, I forget. I've actually been told that the universal basic income is real and is available and is coming for those people that want it. So we're on the same page with that as well.
Absolutely. And the third one I want to show you really quickly is, it says proposed regulation on risk management for major financial institutions and high net worth individuals who are responsible for significant market exposure. So literally this.
Oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I want every diabetic, including you, to know this. It sounds crazy, but give me 60 seconds to explain. Well, everything you thought you knew about diabetes is 90% wrong. After decades of struggling, wishing I didn't have diabetes, I finally found something that works fast. Did you know that what's forming around your pancreas right now could be sabotaging your health every single second? Believe it. Blood sugar imbalance is completely reversible. You might not realize it yet, but the real cause of type 2 isn't directly related to sugar, carbs, or even age. Here's the kicker. This little-known trick turns your own immune system into a weapon against type 2 diabetes. Meanwhile, there's a simple 30-second recipe from Japan that's actually helping people throw away their pill bottles, naturally. It works by flushing out a parasite hiding in your pancreas. Yes, an actual organism that's been immune to every supplement you've tried. It started when a team from Johns Hopkins, along with a top doctor nominated for the Lois Jovanovich Award, discovered this hidden parasite. And more importantly, they found a recipe that attacks it directly, not just adds more chemicals like supplements do. This trick takes 30 seconds. You do it before bed. That's it. The video that shows how. It's short, free, and the recipe is easier than swallowing pills. Big Pharma already tried to wipe it off the internet twice. So if it's still online, watch it before they take it down again.
Organization, the CFTC, which is going to become the main governance, right? Like the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, will probably eventually phase itself out, and the CFTC will take prominence in America, and then of course, globally at the same time too. But they're literally telling us here that they don't care if it's an organization or if it's a person. If you're doing something illegal, if you are responsible for significant market exposure and you're crashing the system, we will hold you liable. And because of the triple executive orders and the USMCA Act, we're now going to seize your assets and then redistribute them to we the people. And it's going to be done through some of the UBIs and some of these Stellar assets. And what's also really funny is, so the CFTC is working with the DOE, and we all know that Q clearance is DOE's top clearance. And they're the ones who said that, so the CFTC is the one who said that in the DOE, they're praising them for their effectiveness in holding individuals and institutions accountable in order to promote confidence. So it's just, more public confirmation that all these various government organizations are working together, but they're acknowledging the clearance that kind of sits at the top of it, managing everything. Show a couple different slides. So back in December of last year, you probably remember or may have seen some articles floating around that Stellar partnered with the UN, and they were distributing cash out to the people in Ukraine. And a lot of people, were very confused by that because they think that the UN is, again, they're black hats. No. Well, yes, they used to be black hats, but they haven't been black hats in many years. In fact, I also work very closely with the people at the UN who are kind of at the top. We work together in the Stellar ecosystem, and so I've been in touch with some very interesting people there and have done an interview with the UN as well. But so what I was surmising, which then got confirmed afterwards, was when they were passing this money over to people in Ukraine, I was thinking that it was going to be a beta test for the UBIs. And sure enough, it was, because what ended up happening is a couple months later. This is Danelle Dixon. She's the CEO of the Stellar Development Foundation. And this is her at Davos giving a presentation. And she talked about how, I mentioned a second ago, the CFTC with the GMAT committee, the Stellar group had done a presentation on the Stellar Aid Assist. And if you look at the statistics, they can send this digital money, which is a representation of, whatever currency that you have. They can send it to millions of people anywhere in the world, right? All you have to do is have access to a phone and have access to the internet. That's it. You don't have to have a bank. That's what being unbanked means. It means you don't have access to a traditional bank system. So now we're talking about people who live in, let's say, villages or mountains or very remote areas. Even they can now receive these funds in a total of 2.5 minutes in terms of execution. So by time, let's say the white hats want to send the UBIs out, they hit the send button, it goes through this quantum link, and it outputs through the Stellar blockchain. You and I have a phone, we have access to the internet because of Starlink, thank you, Elon Musk. And simply all you do is you log into the system, and then you can, if you have a wallet, like I have a wallet, you just hit accept. So it takes like 2 seconds. If you don't yet have a wallet, which is almost 8 billion people in the world don't have a wallet, then you simply create your own profile. And this money is sitting there waiting for you to collect. And that's why this is so interesting, because you can't do that through the traditional system. If you want to disperse a physical asset or a physical currency, you have to set up insane amount of logistics. You have to have, all the trucks and the shipping and maybe planes flying all over the world. You have to have central points of distribution, like centers as an example. And then you have to have a lot of security, because when people are walking around with who knows what kind of amounts of cash, you might not feel, comfortable with the wallet full of hundreds or thousands or even millions of dollars. But if everything's on your phone and the phone is locked with quantum security, you're the only one who has access to it. And you simply just say, tap, I receive. And it's as simple as if people have like Zelle or PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, those kind of, online banking platforms, it'll be as simple as that. And then they have a system where, because it's called a stablecoin, it's pegged to your physical currency. If you want to, you can go to a number of places. MoneyGram just happens to be one of the partnerships with Stellar, but there are many, many partnerships. So say let's say the UBI, I'm just going to make up a random number right now. Let's say in the UBI, you receive $5,000 a month. Well, if you wanted to cash that out because you feel you need the physical currency instead of the digital currency, you go to a place like a MoneyGram, or you go to a place like a crypto ATM, and you simply say, I want to do the conversion now. So you put that 5,000 of digital currency in, and you receive $5,000 of physical currency. So they really covered it.
You're saying something really important there, that you can still get physical currency, which is what they've always told me. Because there's a lot of talk at the moment that cash is disappearing and things like that. It's not that the cash is disappearing that's going to be in our hands. It's just the format in which it's all going to be distributed is going to be operating differently. The actual cash in our hands will still have that. We'll still have physical currency. Correct.
Yeah. And then I don't want to get too much into detail about these slides because they're a little bit busier. I'm trying to see which one. Okay, so I just want to show these two really quickly. So IBM Hyperledger, because we've already briefly mentioned this earlier on the call, I want to show you some of the details of it, because this is information you can find on Hyperledger's website. But if you look over here on the right-hand side, everything's talking about security, right? Securities, faster implementation. And so that's, more proof right now that they're building out quantum security. And this is the governance layer that's being controlled by the white hats, because again, guys, it ties back to IBM WorldWire, which works in unison with Space Force and NSA, and many other organizations. And then if I go into this one, I think this kind of hints a little bit more at what you were discussing earlier as well, because right now we're talking about finances, but in the end, it won't be just about finances. So even though, we talk about the quantum financial system, what the white hats are actually building is called the quantum matrix. And this is distribution for everyday lifestyle at the same time. So they're going to be using these quantum algorithms to create automation, as an example, for the military, for logistics, for governments, for businesses, for agriculture. We even have ones for education now. That one just came a couple months ago. So literally the entire world is going to be put onto blockchain, because what you mentioned that's very important is the local trading, which then reduces the cost of everything. Sorry, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but there's something I wanted to go back to.
One thing that you just said, that everything will run from it. I've been saying that for a long time in my channeling, and now you're confirming it for me. That
Yes.
Everything will run from that military grade software called the quantum system. And like you said, it will run
Yes.
not just finances, but it will run all aspects of our life, including the military.
Yes. And it gets very interesting, because if people are paying attention to the military news, then they will start to see that even governments' military are starting to contract in size, and for myriad reasons. And then pay more attention to the news talking about how the military is adopting new kinds of technology, because that's, when you reduce the size of the force, then you also have, you're basically telling the global militaries around the world, stand down, we're now at peace. And we're now going to be using blockchain to help monitor and secure everything, so that we don't have to have large standing armies anymore.
Yeah.
Now, I was trying to highlight this bullet point, but for whatever reason, it won't highlight for me. Only this bottom one right there. But if you read the second, the top line, it says blockchain could reduce the cost of goods by 66%, 66.6%. The reason why that's very significant to me is because that's a 666. We all know that that's very evil. So what the cabal have been doing is they've been purposely inflating the cost of everything by using logistics to move things around very slowly and inputting all of these, multiple layers of third parties so they can collect all their fees. So by the time you manufacture something and somebody purchases it, it's completely bloated. But by using blockchain, you reduce that time, you reduce the cost. It becomes near instantaneous, just like how you explained it earlier. And so that's how you really help people around the world, but simultaneously we'll eventually be able to move back to the 1950s pricing, because that has been a very big rumor out there for, in the Q community for many years. This is a major piece of that puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is roughly around that same timeline is when all these massive logistics companies started coming out and inflating everything. That's why they're trying to take it back down to that era. And one other thing I want to show you really quickly is the reason why I focus so much on Stellar specifically is because this is, I call it the centerpiece or the keystone of the QFS. And I've actually revised my own statement on that and said, the more I understand about it, it's not even about the QFS. It is the keystone or the centerpiece of the entire Q plan. And the reason why I say that is, if we start from the bottom and we go up, right, like a tree, we had to start with the roots, the foundation. So the foundation of the entire ecosystem is governance. And, we mentioned the quantum computers earlier. It's not just the IBM WorldWire, but every single, it won't be continent, but it'll be like continental region, so to speak. I believe there are 6 other ones, so like North America, South America, Asia, Africa, etc. Each region.
That's very interesting. Sorry to interrupt, because they keep telling me that the world will be divided into northeast, southwest with 6, and they called it 6 commanders in chief. So that's very interesting that you're now dividing it up like that, because I've been saying that for some time. This is mind-blowing to me to hear this from you, actually.
And same for me, because I haven't heard anybody else outside of Stellar talking about that either. So that's the bottom layer. The secondary layer is the CBDC tokens that we showed a second ago, where actually let me flip back to that really quickly, because I think that'll be important to reference. So let me stop the screen share, pull up the other one. Oh, sorry. Give me a second. I actually just closed that PDF down. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so this is a slide that kind of launched us in this conversation. But if you look down the list, you know, DBSA, that's the Development Bank of South Africa. BNDS, I forgot what that one stands for. Do I have it in here somewhere? It's like Bank of, I'm trying to think, new development of something, right? And then Innova is like this conference for the BRICS nations. No, that's the NDB is the New Development Bank right there. And you have HSBC, PNB Paribas. And so what you're going to start to see is a lot of agricultural banks come out. So you've got BRICS banks, agricultural banks. And what do we all know of, you know, what is JSERA? JSERA is the farmers bill. And that's why it's tied to agricultural banks. And of course, you know, we all know that with Q, they've been saying that what's up is down, left is right. Well, what has been probably some of the regions that have been the most suppressed around the world, I think all of us know it's Africa. So they're really giving rise right now to Africa and letting it become its true power because they have just a plethora of resources, both human, but also natural, right? Like commodities as an example. And so they're basically going to empower the African nation by giving them the ability to tap into all this wealth that they naturally already had, but have been, you know, seized from them and given to everyone else but them. And they're working very, very closely with, as an example, Russia, Saudi Arabia, China, etc., which we all know is a large portion of BRICS nations. And they're going into Africa to help build up their infrastructure, build up their technology so they can participate in this at a very, very high level.
So they can then have their part of the vault. So that
yes,
everything
exactly.
that was taken from them in the past will be now put back into the vault and redistributed back down.
Absolutely. So if I come back to the stellar tree now, that gives us, you know, a little bit more context on why do the central banks, why did the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, destroy the central banks? Now we know that the CBDC tokens have nothing to do with central banks. They're the BRICS banks, the African banks, and the agricultural banks. And then over here, now this third bullet point might be a little bit advanced for today's call, but I just want people to understand that there's a program in Stellar called Soroban, SOROBAN. And what it does is, you know, all of these other blockchains in the world, the Bitcoins, the Ethereums, everything, they eventually have to go away because they have to be under white hat governance. And so the only way it can happen is you have to literally do something called wrapping technology. And when they wrap these assets or they wrap the entire blockchain, they can now port it over into Stellar. So that's how you bring in the volume, these hundreds of trillions of dollars that normally would not be able to come into Stellar is now able to because of this wrapping mechanism. So again, guys, if people have heard of something called forking the money, that might be familiar for some people. You know, they're basically taking the old system and they're flushing it into this new system because this new system has all those metrics for people to have transparency and be able to see where all the money is being moved around. So that's why that's really important, is because they have to move every single penny of every single type of asset, whether it's a physical dollar, whether it's the money for real estate, or, you know, precious metals or commodities or anything in the world. It's all coming over here. Now, if we move to the secondary layer, I call, you know, more foundations. This is really the bulk, the meat of Stellar. And so it's funny, you know, Michelle, earlier you mentioned digital IDs, and that's actually something that's being developed right now called an NFT. It stands for a non-fungible token. And it's something that means that you cannot alter the state. So you can't hack it. You can't create duplicates. You cannot, you know, fib with it in any way. There will be
when I talked about Web 5, Web 7 before Christmas, that they were teaching me about these IDs that, as we said earlier, that we would all have for life. And that would be our code that we would use like for everything, which is what you've got here, the medical records and everything. Yes. I didn't realize it was an NFT though. I didn't realize that's what it was.
Mm-hmm. And there will be different versions. So some of them will be able to be adapted. So for instance, like your medical records, as you are, kind of progressing through whatever your medical treatment is, and the doctors or, whoever in the future they're going to be, the natural practitioners, most likely, maybe they give you certain recommendations, or they, are recording your treatments. In order to record it, they have to then mutate it. They have to evolve it. So there will be certain versions where you can mutate the records, but again, it's going to be transparent, and you have to have certain access to it to be able to mutate it. And a lot of that, I'm guessing, will have to do with your control because it's your record.
Oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I want every diabetic, including you, to know this. It sounds crazy, but give me 60 seconds to explain. Well, everything you thought you knew about diabetes is 90% wrong. After decades of struggling, wishing I didn't have diabetes, I finally found something that works fast. Did you know that what's forming around your pancreas right now could be sabotaging your health every single second? Believe it. Blood sugar imbalance is completely reversible. You might not realize it yet, but the real cause of type 2 isn't directly related to sugar, carbs, or even age. Here's the kicker. This little-known trick turns your own immune system into a weapon against type 2 diabetes. Meanwhile, there's a simple 30-second recipe from Japan that's actually helping people throw away their pill bottles, naturally. It works by flushing out a parasite hiding in your pancreas. Yes, an actual organism that's been immune to every supplement you've tried. It started when a team from Johns Hopkins, along with a top doctor nominated for the Lois Jovanovich Award, discovered this hidden parasite. And more importantly, they found a recipe that attacks it directly, not just adds more chemicals like supplements do. This trick takes 30 seconds. You do it before bed. That's it. The video that shows how. It's short, free, and the recipe is easier than swallowing pills. Big Pharma already tried to wipe it off the internet twice. So if it's still online, watch it before they take it down again.
Real estate, there's just so much corruption in the real estate market, in the business market. So when they put these contracts onto NFTs, then, the records are open for anybody to track what's been changing. And it's very important because there's something called a smart contract, which I want to get into just very briefly. Now, I think almost everybody in the world understands the terms of a normal contract. So if you and I were to go into contract, typically what happens is we write up some kind of term, you and I countersign the agreement, and then it stays there, and you have a copy and I have a copy. And we have to make sure that, whatever we signed to, we agreed on, because if we need to make any changes, now we have to go through the process of creating addendums to it.
Yeah.
And every change is an addendum, and it's very laborious. It costs lots of time, lots of money, and lots of lawyers. And so what the blockchain is doing is they're now using quantum algorithms to create permutations on the, through the programming language. And so this will account for millions of permutations, and you'll never have to have the lawyer again. You'll never have to spend money on it or time on it. You just have to authorize it. So, so that kind of ties into something called a trust line. So these are like, think about your bank account. When you go to a bank and you open up your account, you show them your government ID. They verify all your records, and then now you have a bank account. Let's say a checkings account. And every time you want to move money in and out of there, you then have to log in and authorize that, yes, this is me. Yes, I'm moving money in, or yes, I'm moving money out. That's very similar to how blockchain works as well. So if I were to log into my digital wallet, I'm the only one that's authorized to say, yes, I'm moving this asset, or I'm receiving this asset. And so that's how that's going to work for contracts too. Now, if we move on to the second one, quantum voting, I think all of us also have heard of in Gesera, there will be something called quantum voting, which is also immutable. And that's actually, again, going to be done through the Stellar network. So how that works is they'll be able to tie your ID to your government ID. They can validate, who's real, who's false. They can start to weed out of the database, how many people from 100 years ago are still voting. You will not be allowed to vote twice, let alone 100 times. And whatever you vote cannot be changed. that's the best part of it. So you're not going to have things like, Seidel and what were some of the other ones? The other, like the big the vote, the minions, the minions and Seidels, and I mean there are a whole bunch. There were like 10 or 15 companies that were responsible for that. And I actually had the privilege of talking to the gentleman whose company discovered all the election fraud. So I actually have the information of election fraud a month before the election took place, and we were seeing it happen live time. And he explained to me that it's as simple as a drag and drop folder. So if you open up your computer and you have, one folder that's Republican, one folder that's Democrat, you can just open up that file and say there's a million records in there. You can either select all and delete or drag. And that's what they were doing.
Yes.
But on them, you can't do that. And so it's crazy.
It is crazy.
The financial infrastructure. So that's, people would have probably heard of things like SWIFT or ECB clearing, the European Central Bank, EBA clearing or SPFS. There's so many around the world. All of these are also coming into Stellar because as this digital currency moves all over the world, they have to make sure everything's in full compliance and it's being governed by a global standard, which is the ISO 20022 standard. We also have commodities. So all the commodities that you mentioned, Michelle, at the beginning of this call, and it doesn't matter if it's your physical gold and silver or your diamonds or your oil and gas, your lumber, your wheat, your coffee, your salt, anything. All of that has actually been tokenized and put onto the blockchain. They started doing that last year around like February, March timeline. Also, all the stock market in the entire world is coming into Stellar. And there are multiple versions of it, but a big portion of it is called D-Stock, and that's spelled D-S-T-O-Q, if people want to go and research that. So they're literally moving the whole stock market into Stellar. You even have government bonds. Again, everything's being digitized, and they're putting it onto here for full transparency, the way even what the government is doing when they're moving assets around. I mentioned earlier stablecoins. So these are your one-to-one conversion between a physical dollar and your online dollar. That's a stablecoin. It will be pegged. And all of these are not minted or created by a company. These are actually created by the government's treasury themselves. So these are official. So a lot of the stablecoins that people may have been hearing in the news recently, for instance, like Terra, Luna, Tether, USDC, they have, really made the headlines recently because they've been depegging. The price has been crashing. It's because they're not the official stablecoin. They're just a company trying to create something, and they eventually will be all null and void because the government, the white hat controlled governments have to go and clean everything out and put them onto this system in the future.
Okay.
And then I think, have you ever discussed something called Bretton Woods 3 before?
No. So everything that I've discussed before is really just about the overview, like you've been talking today, how it's set up with the Starlink, the decentralization, the CBDC, and things like how they're going to govern it, how it's going to be white hat controlled, how the military and certain types of software are going to oversee it, and how we're going to have these ID codes which is going to help so that things can't be hacked and we can't get into this money laundering and fraudulent activity. So that's really where I'm at in terms of what everything is called, like the names of everything that I don't know. And so that's hopefully where we can come in again on other interviews and break it down a bit more so that people understand the names of everything.
Sure. So I guess the last one I wanted to mention on this slide is the reason why this is really important to understand is there's something called Bretton Woods 3. And I think that most people understand a long time ago, our dollars were backed by physical gold. And then a couple decades ago, they took it off of the gold reserve, and now it's backed by thin air. Everywhere in the whole world is backed by thin air. So that's what's known as Bretton Woods 2. Now, Bretton Woods 3 is the next iteration. And what it says is we're no longer going to be a gold-backed society. We're actually going to back up all the world's currencies by physical precious metals and physical commodities, which is what you were mentioning earlier. So every country is going to keep their physical reserves, but they're going to tokenize it, put it onto the blockchain. So you can see that big vault that stores the total number, and you can see which distribution is going to which country, which treasury department. And as it moves around and it's all on the blockchain, it's just the digital version, but your own physical version does not need to move. So just more confirmation about all your channeling work is being proven right now on the blockchain. And that gets really exciting because that's how you have a lot of fairness, I think, right? Because there are going to be many countries where if you were to only back it by a physical precious metal, well, not every country has access to, let's say, gold, silver, platinum, palladium mining reserves, but they can have, whatever plantation for coffee beans, or they can have wheat over here, they can have lumber over there. There's no end to what you can commoditize. And so everybody will have a lot of value for their currency. Yeah, and then the top layer, I don't want to get into detail because that's going to be more for the future, but what they're doing, what the white hats are doing right now, and I'm in touch with multiple teams who are actually programming this as we speak, is they're going to eventually create a system for self-banking. And that way, first of all, there will be no banks, you will be your own bank, but more importantly, the white hats really want people to understand, what is responsible spending, but they also want people to learn how to take.
Mom had Alzheimer's at 78, but today, at 82, she solves crossword puzzles better than me thanks to a spice hidden in the kitchen. Now imagine this. My mother was diagnosed with severe dementia at 78. Today, at 82, her memory is better than mine. People are always surprised when I tell them it all started with something as simple as a spice. Here's the crazy story. Ever since my mother started showing signs of dementia, which later progressed to Alzheimer's, she's loved these senior wellness fairs. Last year, I went with her to one. We almost skipped the last talk, but then she saw a name she recognized from a podcast, Dr. Smith, a famous brain health researcher. And honestly, I think it was God's way of making sure we didn't leave. He wasn't selling anything. He just walked up and started talking. And then he said something that completely changed the way we understood memory loss. He explained that most memory problems don't start with age. They start with something much more subtle, a dangerous toxin that silently poisons the brain every night, destroying memory from the inside out. He said it blocks the brain's ability to protect and repair itself, which is why people wake up confused, forgetful, and disconnected. But what changed everything for us was what he revealed next. A powerful home trick that helps detoxify the brain. It wasn't a medicine. It wasn't a $300 supplement, just something natural, simple, and science-based that most people have never heard of. My mother started using this trick every night that week. Now she remembers her grandchildren's birthdays, holds complete conversations, and has even started doing her daily crossword puzzles again. It's like watching someone slowly come back to life. That night, I asked the event organizer if there was any way to rewatch his full speech. She downloaded the content, and I asked him to put it on a website so everyone could watch it. You can access it by clicking the button below. After seeing how much this helped my mother, her clarity, her sleep, and even her sense of humor, I decided to share it publicly. I'll leave the link up for only 24 hours. Initially, this video was only shared with those attending the event. So, yes, if you or someone you love is struggling with brain fog or forgetfulness, you need to watch it. It's a quick video. No exaggerations, just the truth. He wrote everything in his own words.
Control of their finances. And so anybody who has learned of the concept of residual income will definitely appreciate this, because residual income means you do the work once and the money comes to you time and time again, and there's no end in sight. So they're literally building this in the background so that people will eventually be able to create to generate a continual return on their own investments. So they will not have to be borrowing or lending money in the future. But that's, way down the pipeline.
So that's kind of like what we call passive income now, isn't it? Where you say, like on a very simple level, that would mean something like you make a YouTube video, which is monetized, and it sits on YouTube for 100 years, and people come along at whatever time and they view it. And every time somebody views it, because it's monetized, you make money on that video that you made 100 years ago. And it's called passive income. And so in a way, this sounds a little bit like that concept where you set something up once and then it continues to generate income for you while you sleep, sort of thing.
Absolutely. That's absolutely what they're going to build. And I think a lot of it ties to, I've always thought that money is basically just a tool, right? It's a platform, it's an energy exchange. And so not to get into, maybe this is more for a future call, but I think you'll resonate with this. What I believe the white hats are doing is they're putting us on training wheels. and they're saying, okay, we've all been part of this corrupt slavery system for thousands of years now, and we've been trained to be money hungry because that's what the system has been teaching us to do. So consequently, that's how we've been performing. Now, this next iteration with the QFS is going to be teaching us how to break from those patterns and say, if money were not an object, if time were not an object, how much better could we be living our lives? How much better could we be helping other people live their lives and helping basically, have more fulfilling, more happy, more meaningful lives and interactions? So this next phase.
That actually is what the Quantum Leap speech was about from Donald Trump recently. So
yes,
when
exactly.
talking about the Quantum Leap, and I did a video about that with Mark Atwood, he's actually talking about NESARA, GESARA, and this new world that we're moving into, and everything that we've talked about today, and what you're talking about now, about having a life which is not just geared up around having to make enough money to put a roof over your head. It's a lifestyle where you're actually able to enjoy your life, and money and trying to just pay for the necessities is not the end all and be all of your every sort of waking moment.
Yeah, so it's almost like these training wheels are giving us, because they have to deprogram all the cabal programming and then reprogram us in a much more peaceful, loving, humanitarian, community building kind of mindset.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to be on the almost like the ground floor, watching them build it, seeing the confirmation of, and eventually we'll be living this pretty soon too.
Well, Emily, we've been on for 1 hour 50. So I think we should probably wrap up for today where we're up to right now. I think we've covered an awful lot, much more than I thought we would cover. But actually, it's been so interesting because as I've been saying all the way through, I've been channeling it as an overview, and you've now been able to confirm with documents and intel that those things are actually happening and we are going in that direction. Firstly, that leaves me a little bit stunned in one respect as to who it is I've got with me, because until you've actually been able to confirm it all today, I have just been going on the fact that I trust my spiritual guides. But now we've been able to put the two things together. It's absolutely fascinating. And I really hope that we'll be able to do some more things in the future, because I think this is very, very useful for everybody to see the two sides. Before we wrap up, is there any final thing that you'd like to say, Emily, before you go?
I would just like to say that if people are interested in doing more research into this, we actually have created a Telegram channel to help people learn more about the QFS, GESARA, how Stellar and even Ripple relate to all of this and kind of tie it into the Q plan a little bit. And so let me actually grab that link.
Yeah, that will be very useful. It's the Quantum Stellar Initiative. Is that right, on Telegram?
Well, yes and no. So Quantum Stellar Initiative is the link to my channel. And that's where I put all the intel out there. But the one that they'll actually want to use for the training system is a little @ symbol, QSI welcome.
QSI.com, did you say?
No, sorry, QSI welcome. It's the Telegram channel.
QSI welcome. Okay.
Yes.
And
what we've done is we've created this self-guided training system. So it's a 3-part module. The welcome is more like a lobby, kind of shows you, what is the concept of it? How do we move through the system, where you can do it on your own time? So the first module is QFS proofs. So we take a lot of this information, go into much more detail, and a lot of it is PDFs of various documents that we found, articles that can confirm it. And I've done a lot of videos with, multiple people around. And so we put that out there with everything that said has to be backed by some kind of public information. There's no decode in there whatsoever. After they take a quiz and they pass the quiz, they can then move on to what we call the Stellar Basics training. And this is only for people who want to learn, how do you actually invest into this opportunity? If the investment part of it is not for you yet, then don't worry. You don't have to go, proceed further. But one of the reasons why people are interested in doing it is because it takes a lot less money to invest in Stellar than it does a physical metal, or even the other currencies and bonds like Zim and Dinar, etc. Because with just, let's say, like $10, you can have millions, sometimes billions of tokens in Stellar because it's this new. It's like, when you have a startup company in their garage. So people's monies can stretch much further in the Stellar ecosystem if you're an investor. So we kind of walk you through step by step how to do it. And then it's, everybody doing it on their own time.
So they can find all that information at Telegram at QSI Welcome. Is that correct? If they want to learn more about investing into Stellar blockchain and the tokens that you were explaining. So that's been a really interesting session today, Emily. I'm so glad you agreed to come and speak to me and to my
Thank you so much for the invite.
And I think I'm going to go back and listen to all this again and take more notes and hopefully get more channeling. And I really hope we can do more things in the future, particularly around perhaps going into a bit more detail about the blockchain.
Sure.
Because I can explain to you what they said to me, and then we can perhaps do the same format as today, and you come in with the background. So
Sure,
thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's an honor.
Thank you so much for getting up so early because of our time zones. I think you were up at like 4 a.m. or something ridiculous. So
No worries.
and you're looking amazing, all the same. So thank you so much, Emily, and love you lots, and see you next time.
You too. Can't wait. Looking forward to the next time as well. Bye, Michelle.
Bye now.